and landscape design veteran with degrees in horticulture, design, and green roof systems. She has taught classes in restoration ecology, native plant identification, and landscape design. She's designed landscapes and landscape management plans for parks, commercial, and residential customers. You can tell she has a lot of experience. She's also been active in local conservation organizations and worked to develop programs with Pierce County and the city of Tacoma. She continues to teach classes today. Anna is here today to help show us how it is possible to help birds and to deepen our connections with nature in our own yards and gardens. I would like to introduce AnnaThurston.
Good evening, and thank you for having me here. You're a delightful audience and a really welcoming community. I really appreciate meeting you over dinner, especially. It was delicious. Let's see if I can give you a tour of where I live. This is a little bit about who I am. That's me in the front right there. I gotta find my little pointer. Anyway, that's me next to Rufus. Rufus was my buddy, kind of like you all up front. All right. And these were my friends too, because we lived outside of Denver, and there was nobody nearby. We were the first people to live in that area. But the birds were my inspiration, so were the plants, and so was Audubon, actually. My dad was a collector of the prints and stuff like that. And so I started trying to emulate that art. Then I moved into conservation. I was the water conservationist, one of the very first in the country for the city of Aurora outside of Denver. And we did collaborative work all over Denver to advertise conservation, water conservation. I love to hunt mushrooms. Up in the middle up there, that's me talking about restoration, where to put that plant. Because we go back out into the woods, and I actually coordinated a program that salvaged plants from development sites and then replanted them elsewhere, in public parks, at schools, at home. And then the art side of me is over there, doing a mural. These are 3 different designs that I did way back in college in the 80s. And I threw those in there because they were all installed, with the exception of the Lincoln residence. This is a public park in Loveland, Colorado, and that's in Fort Collins. And so I do have a few landscapes out there from way back. My focus has always been on native plants. And part of it is because it makes sense. Why are we bringing palm trees to anywhere else than where palm trees grow? And so I hope you don't have any palm trees. But I've always been for the birds. I really like to eat salmon. How about you? Yeah, okay. And I also really have this value for a sense of place. I like to feel like I'm in the Northwest when I'm in the Northwest. I like to feel like I'm in Colorado or in Florida with those palm trees. Okay, so I'm trying to get beyond being homogenized, I guess. And I would like to share that with you. Some of my inspiration comes from these different sources. I have this book with me, Suburbia. John Marsleff is local. He was at the University of Washington in Seattle when he studied, with the aid of Don Norman, who is listed here, how bird populations are changing as we populate our urban and less urban spaces. He did 2 different sites in Seattle and at the JBLM. And we'll see a little bit of that data. There's also Doug Tallamy, who you may have heard of. His book, Bringing Nature Home, I also have that here. And we'll dig into some of that too. Desiree Narango is one of Doug Tallamy's graduate students. She's a PhD now, and she's been studying chickadees and how much food they like to eat. Okay, always out there has been Russ Link's Landscaping for Wildlife. It's a big book. It's still totally valid. Don't let it go away. It's a good book. And then there's always learning right from nature. The more you can get out and visit it firsthand, the better. And over on the left, your right side, are the bird songs. And I've been using new apps, different books. The bird songs book is kind of fun. I'm using the Merlin app. How many people have heard of Merlin? Oh boy, I love that stuff. Okay, so let's dig in and see where we go. This is the research that Don Norman has been doing over many years. And you can see in urban King County at the Joint Base, Lewis McCord, and he had 120 mist nets in King County and 215 days when he was measuring birds that he caught in those nets. Okay, these are the birds that he caught. Okay, you can see the number variations throughout the chart. And on the far right side, you'll see what made those changes happen. They're losing access to conifers. We're cutting them all down because we're building houses. It doesn't have to be a conifer tree for habitat loss to go away or to occur. How about less open space? If you're a bluebird or a meadowlark, you like open space. So if you don't have that much anymore, that's a problem. Cavities. How many big trees have we got that we're leaving as snags? That's an important detail. And that's the majority of those losses that are listed there. So here's an old stump with some salal and the evergreen huckleberry. Don Norman measured those top bullet items, the 5, 6 bullet items. I came to this conclusion myself after I was reading Suburbia and the Bringing Nature Home, Tallamy's book, among other things too. Because all of those things kind of end up relating to how much food you do or don't have to feed your kids. You guys need to eat, don't you? Yeah. Okay, I know I was hungry at that age. Okay, here's some more data that shows how the numbers are changing. Okay, notice the species are different. The birds that we saw before, do you want me to go back to that? I'm going to go back here. We see warblers, finches, thrushes, vireo. Those are not the same birds. They're vacating. They're going somewhere else, if not just disappearing. Here's who's replacing them. Crows. These are the big 9 birds, 10 birds that John Marsleff realized were the most common urban birds across the country. And it's because they're very resilient and adaptive birds. Okay? So you get to see their numbers really rising in the locations where we were doing the research. Here's Don face on. And you can see, again, those birds that showed up in force with numbers. The numbers really don't mean that much to me other than, oh, I see a trend. I don't want you to mesmerize this. It's the bird species that are shifting from what was naturally here to what is now here. Okay? It's just the shift. And one thing that Marsleff discovered was that the number of birds are more species variable. That means there's more different species in the urban landscape than there were before the area got built or developed, which I find is kind of interesting. They're tough birds. Crows, robins, they know how to make it. Okay, so here's a little bit more about Doug Tallamy's work. Again, I have that book here. So it gets to the root of the deal with this little chickadee on here, with breakfast, maybe lunch and dinner. Chickadees deliver a lot of food to their little parcels of chicklets. And it's pretty important that that food is soft because you don't want a bug stuck down your gullet when you're too young. Okay? You want something soft and chewy and tastes good like a worm. And those worms, we're going to look at that, have all the good stuff in them. Okay? What we're learning is that those worms have a lot more energy per unit value than birdseed or berries, which don't exist when these guys are hatching. And the other thing, too, is that the nursery trade is giving us plants that don't host bugs or worms. That's a problem. Okay? So this is why Doug Tallamy is getting back to the native plant diversity itself is very important, because those plants tolerate our existing soils, our existing weather patterns for the most part. That's changing now. That's going to be a new game. But they have the bugs and things on them, and you don't even know it. That's the funny thing. We've gotten this notion that, oh, there's bugs in my tree. I got to do something about it. And that's a sales pitch. Don't buy it. Okay? We need those bugs. Okay? Let's take a look at, this is probably one of the things that stood out for me, was that hub plants are really important native species that actually foster the most bugs on them without our knowing it. And it's like looking at, you can see the Americas, the two North and South American continents, with all the airport hubs listed there. So it's a metaphor for how plants could be the same kind of thing. You have some important species like oak or alder or willow. Those are three really major hubs, like going to LaGuardia or O'Hare Airport. Okay? Those are the main plants that you're going to want to eat from the most because they have the most bugs. And all of the other shrubs and other plants where you also get bugs and maybe some nectar or other things, those are the side trips. Okay? Desiree Narango did that research, and it's pretty interesting. You can find her work on YouTube, and it's really engaging. She does a lot of fun stuff. Okay, so more of Tallamy. This is where the bugs start to have a lot of value. And it's interesting to see which bugs have more, and it's the worms. Okay, look at that total carotenoids per microgram in a silly little worm versus a beetle. I wouldn't want a beetle in my throat either. Spiders, I can do without them too. Ants, definitely, I don't want them. All right, so let's get into the landscape part. This is where I start to do my work. I get to visit landscapes like this, and they say, well, what do you want us to do? And I was like, tear out the lawn. And the reason is because it's a lot of work. It really doesn't serve a great deal of purpose other than saying, hey, I got money to take care of this lawn, and I want you to see my house. And it might not be that, I don't know, that's a point of personal opinion on whether or not you like the house. But if we were to take out our lawns, and I don't think you really have that problem here. I haven't seen, Carol, you got a lawn on your front. We're working with Carol. All right, if you take out your lawn, you're going to be able to pull this off. You're going to be helping birds. At first, it's going to be a lot more work, though. Okay, so you've got to really be committed to this. Because the changeover from lawn to alternate landscape is a big push. Okay, so let's look at what that looks like. This is why I do it. I mean, birds are so darn cute, aren't they? Holy moly! Okay, here's Tallamy's research again. He studied all of the different plants that you could get at the nursery. Okay, and here are the bugs that he was finding out there. Okay, look at all those caterpillars, and these are the ones we don't even see. Okay, they're in there, but why do you need to go get some insecticide when you don't even know that it's there? Okay, so and again, it's not about mesmerizing what's on this list or the numbers or anything like that, but it's Important to know that certain plants host more of these bugs than others do. And I'm moving towards the horticultural dilemma. The nursery trade has been really pushing to provide us with plants that are disease resistant or that don't host bugs. Makes sense on the surface, but we're starting to rethink this philosophy. You know, yeah, we want to make it easy for you to buy a plant, but we also have to take a look at what's been happening when we do that. Okay? These are the species of plants that Talamy researched mostly on the eastern United States that featured more or fewer bugs, or caterpillars, should I say. White oak really stands out as hosting, you know, a big number of caterpillars, both in terms of count, but also in terms of species. And that species count is important because certain birds eat only certain species of bugs. Go figure. Okay, are you picky eaters? Are you picky eaters? All right, that could be part of the problem. And it doesn't have to be a problem, but we just need to recognize it and work with it, okay? So coming back to the plant part, this is a multi-pronged issue. What's a native plant? What is your definition? There are so many different ways to define a native plant. You know, was it here before the Europeans arrived en masse? Was it something that has a symbiotic relationship with wildlife? That's where I kind of go. And it's not just, you know, wildlife is a pretty broad term for birds, bats, mammals, anything. You know, we saw, who did we see? The newt today, the leathery newt. And so these critters know how to survive on their own without our help. We don't really need to help nature at all. Nature really has a good grip on it. And so the idea is to figure out how we can emulate nature, I think. Okay, so here's Russ Link's book. I didn't bring this with me, I'm sorry, but I want you to, you'll get to see this picture again and again. We'll go down the layer on the right side there to take a look at the overstory, the understory, the shrubs, and all the birds that are in each of these locations. So if you want to know plants, this is the place to take your notes, because I want you to be thinking about what kind of habitat do you have? Or maybe you have more than one habitat in your backyard around your house or wherever it is that you want to help birds. Okay? That's going to be the idea. So we're going to start with the trees. We're going to take a look at evergreens and deciduous ones. And you can see I've already started to parse out which ones are better than others. And we'll look at each of these. The yellow cedar, tough tree, hemlock, all of these are pretty good trees. And this is the view across the street from my house. I look at this every day and I love it. Because I have this vine maple, these big, tall, foresty trees. That's just that's looking to the right. And that's at the nature center down there, over there. So these are the things that make me sane, these views, these plants. And I want you to have the same thing. Because they not only have beautiful visual value, but I have this incredible habitat for lots of birds. I have over 100 different species of birds that visit my space throughout the year. I think that's the right count. It depends on whether or not you include the eagle that's flying way overhead. Does that count? Okay, good. Bellen's shaking her head. Okay, so some of the birds we'll see in the overstory. All right, this is your test to see what you know as your birds. Okay. Is that a crossbill? Okay. The cedar waxwing, the jaybird over there. How about some owls? I heard some owls this evening, Carol. When I was out looking for nettles, I heard the long-eared owls. Or how about a olive-sided flycatcher? Have you ever heard one of those say, "Quick, 3 beers! Quick, 3 beers!" And it's usually at the top of the tree. Okay, way at the top. And it'll fly out, get a bug, come back and land and do it again. Quick, 3 beers. Okay, I love that. Okay, some of the best overstory trees. You've got them all around you right here. Lots of hemlock, the western red cedar on the right. Okay, these are sturdy plants. They deal with the weather that we have. If the soil is supportive of them, it means that we need to replenish the soil and let the leaf drop stay. We don't need to rake it away. Okay, soil is a pretty critical part of this story that I'm not even going to go into tonight. I'm just looking at the plants. This is a multi-pronged effort. So I want you to call me up if you have any doubts about how to work this. Here's another type of hemlock, mountain hemlock. It's got nice foliage and interesting form. And the Alaska yellow cedar we've talked about a little bit, but there's the shape of it. It kind of has that droopy shape to it, which is kind of interesting. How about spruce? If you have a wet space, a really wet space, and you want something evergreen, needly, the Sitka spruce is a good choice. And it is also very attractive to the red-headed sapsucker. Is it red-headed? Yeah, it's not the red-breasted. One of the two. All right, I'm still getting my birds. But you can see all the different shapes and things on the cones. There's a lot of interesting things about these plants if you start to look at them. Okay, firs, generally the way I remember them is they're friendly. They're soft at the tip. Spruces are spiny. Okay, the mnemonics help me remember and pass the word along. How about ponderosa pine? It smells like vanilla. You want some vanilla on your ice cream? Okay, the tree here, this has Christmas balls on it, so you can tell how big that tree is. That's just a new tree, but an old one looks like that. Holy moly. That's the kind of landscape I grew up in when I was in that little picture with Rufus. And then this Doug fir on the right side, that tree on the right is at least 150 feet tall. We looked at one today that had a girth that was easily 4.5 feet across the trunk. I was impressed. That was really cool, and it was missing its top. You have some really magic trees over here. And it's got that really cool cone that looks like it has mice running up into the cone. Okay, that's how you tell that one. Okay, how about some deciduous trees, trees that lose their leaves? Bitter cherry is a really good one, especially if you have wet sites like this. You have a lot of wet sites on the island here. And so I've kind of organized a little bit towards that. I love this because it does put on a pretty good show in the spring with flowers, and it has this really cool exfoliating bark. It's beautiful bark with those little lenticels that always go parallel to one another. On the right side is our Gary oak. And it's only going to grow in specific places, generally not places that are wet. But it likes really good drainage, and you'll see it an awful lot down on the Columbia Gorge. The one tree that is on the right is actually on a parking island. I think the island was, or the parking area was built around it. It was there before the roadway was. So there's one really tough tree. People say, oh, you can't put that Gary oak in an urban place. Why not? That's still there. That's an 80-year-old tree or a lot older. That's amazing, especially to tolerate all of that industrial stuff around it. How about cascara? If you want to play a dirty trick on your friends, feed them the bark. It's the tea of the bark. It'll make them run. Okay, they do have little cherries, and it's not a very nice thing to do. All right, over there on the right side, you've got the big leaf maple, and those leaves can be about as big as a dinner plate. So they aren't kidding about big when they say big leaf. The flower that you see coming off of here, this is almost past the point of time when it's edible, and it tastes like asparagus. You can dip it in egg batter and fry it up. It's pretty good. It's really good for you. And the leaves, they make some of the best worm compost that I know of. Yum. Okay, let's look at another layer from the bird's perspective. Okay, we're on the middle area, and we're getting into the nuthatches and the kinglets, jays, woodpeckers, and things like that. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, I hope I'm not just running roughshod over this. Look at all the birds that are in this place, in this part of the... Do you know what these are? I see you looking at that going, I think I know what that bird is. All right, so we have a little... This might be a kinglet, I think, and a nuthatch. A Steller's jay. What kind of an owl is that? That's a barred owl, right. And how big is that? That's about life size right there. That pileated woodpecker. Okay, crows, ravens might even, well, the ravens would be in the last category. And our little hummingbirds, either Anna's or Rufus. Rufus hummingbirds are in steep decline right now. Just because the Anna's hummingbirds are kind of nudging them out of territory. The rock, or the dove, the band-tailed pigeon. If you have cedars, Doug fir, sometimes just thick growth, they like to move in. It's kind of fun to watch them coming in at dusk because they flutter around and get nestled in. And of course, chickadees, goldfinches, and I think there's a golden crown kinglet. This is the ruby crown over here. Okay, got to catch up on our bird thing here. Okay, getting back to those hubs again. The ones with the stars are the better plants that serve you well, but not all of them really work in every place. So I'm going to make a note of the point that a list is a list. It doesn't really tell you what plant is going to go where and what it needs when you get it in the ground. And timing is really critical too. So try not to rely so much on a list, but do try to get acquainted with your plants and where they grow naturally. And so often I try to include images that show you where these plants are doing well, because either they are in their natural habitat or they are in a place that emulates that. Okay? In the deciduous category, we have birches, hazelnuts. These are all really common plants that are actually pretty cool. Okay? The best ones, shore pine. It's also, it's the same pine that grows up in the mountains, which is the lodgepole. The common name is kind of curious because it can mislead you. It could either be a lodgepole or a shore pine, but it's the same plant, and they grow very differently in different places, which is really kind of interesting. And I think that says something about the weather at the beach. Okay? Whereas up in the mountains, they're all tied together, you know, in a very tight clump like dog hair. Okay? You can usually tell these because they'll have clusters of 2 needles. Over on the right, you can see a silk tassel. Those that's a larger bush tree, and it's very fast to grow, and it is quite evergreen. So it'll look a little bit like a holly, but and it grows to the south of Washington, more along the coast. These are both good coastal plants. The one thing I like about this plant, and there are cultivars of it that are very interesting because they've got that fringy stuff that hangs on them, and it looks really very nice. Adds something to it. Bush tits love that plant because the bugs love to hide in those flowers. Okay, now what about these two? Does anybody have a madrona on their property? All right, a couple of hands. Do you like the leaves? I've had one right by my driveway, and it became a problem because I started to slip on the leaves because it's prolific in producing them. But it's a very prolific food producer as well for birds. Robins love those big strawberry-like berries. So, you know, it's a love it or hate it kind of plant, depending on where you put it. And it also requires particular habitat. And more they're succumbing to local urban air pollution problems. They get the black spots on them, or they get frozen by a late freeze. So fewer and fewer people take advantage of them. The juniper is a really tough tree. This does not need any water. Okay, you can see it's growing on a really hot exposure, well-drained slope. Okay, that's probably granite that it's growing on too, not clay. It could be growing on clay too, but those are plants that would require a really particular habitat to be successful with. Here are plants that you don't need to worry so much about, which is why I like them. Vine maple, boy, one of the toughest native plants I know of. You can prune the heck out of it. It gives you great fall color. It does neat things when you cluster it up like that. So it's a good urban tree, and it just keeps going. The hazelnut over there, you can see there's two flowers here. This is the female flower right here, and this is the male catkin, which is really only about so long, and it's probably just about done blooming right now. Up here, here's a hazelnut. This is what you can buy at the grocery store. And the difference between a native and a non-native hazelnut is the number of catkins hanging on them. If you have 2 or more catkins, like these long ones here, that means it's probably a non-native hazelnut. So tough tree, birds usually cache those seeds for you. They plant them where they're going to grow. I've got a great one that the birds put in the right place, just the perfect spot. All right, we've seen one of these here before, the bitter cherry, wild plum. Here's a new one, the serviceberry, blueberry-ish like fruit. Great spring color. They aren't quite fragrant, but they also have great fall color. Okay. Here's some other. Oh, dogwood I really like. All right, so dogwood, a lot of people don't realize that dogwood comes in a tree form as much as a shrub form. And this is the tree. They'll generally have 4 bracts. That's not a flower, it's a bract around a flower, which is the button in the middle, which is this here. Okay? And the crows love to come and rob this tree of branches all winter long because that's what they make their nests with. They like that wood for some reason. How about hawthorn or crabapple? Okay, Prunus serotina would be one for the, that's not right actually. The Prunus serotina goes with the other, sorry. All right, so let's keep going. Going down to the shrub layer. We're gonna go into the flycatchers, goldfinches. So, you know, we've seen some of these birds going in different directions, up and down. They aren't exclusive to the shrub layer. But I am going to give you a little test about this. Okay? Who knows what these birds are? The one on the bottom right, it should be a giveaway. This one, is this a female or a male? It's got a yellow eye. That means it's a female. Okay, that's a bush tit. Okay, how about this one? Little wren. Okay, how about this guy here? Okay, and there's the red-headed sapsucker. You can see it's doing its business. How about this one? Junco. Look at that beak. That beak is a good clue. Over there too. Little finches. Sparrows and finches. How about the plants that they like to hang out? Everybody loves a rhodie. Is rhododendron native on this island? Yes? Are you sure? I've seen it growing across the bridge, Narrows Bridge, over on Gig Harbor area, Kitsap area. But I haven't ever seen it on this side of the bridge. And I'm puzzled by that, because I want to know what it is that makes that difference. And I don't think it's because we dug them all up from over here. There's a reason for that. They like that tall canopy that they get under the evergreens, and I think there's something acid about the soil and the duff that's under it. So think about that. There's lots of cultivated rhododendrons as well. Now the trade-off with rhododendron is the maintenance that you're going to maybe not want to do. It's up to you. Okay, this is what I call detrussing, breaking these little old flower stalks off, and sometimes you'll get bud dieback on those if it's not a happy plant. On the right side, We've got a different type of oak. That's a shrubby oak, and it's about as tall as I am. Maybe a bit taller, up to where my hand is. And it's a nice evergreen shrub. Very slow growing. But the birds just go ape over these catkins. Here, oaks create catkins, and they do create acorns, too. So you're going to be able to appreciate that. It's a nice screen, but it takes time to get there. All right, so here's a summary of all of the different native trees and shrubs that birds will use. We haven't looked at elderberries yet, or mock orange. We're going to look at more of these as we go. I believe we're videotaping this one, so you'll get to see this later, maybe. But let's look at these. How about those evergreen huckleberries? Who gets to pick those? Oh yeah, I see you pick evergreen huckleberries. Okay, a nice shrub. It's kind of tumbly. It's not the greatest hedge. Probably couldn't prune it like one, but it is a good, strong evergreen. The black-cap raspberry, we were looking at some of these earlier today. They have the whitish stem, but otherwise they look an awful lot like the Himalayan blackberry. They even act like it. They grow over and root over there. And they can really grab onto your clothes and not let go. Okay, how about the osoberry over there? That's on the top right. That's the harbinger of spring, first thing to come out, with some exceptions. And if you're lucky, you will see the fruit. The birds usually beat me to that. And this is the habitat in which it's growing naturally down across the water from you at Kobayashi Park. Okay, down in the bottom right, I think you're probably all familiar with salal. Robins love salal berries. Okay, how about other fruiting shrubs? Roses, anybody? You can make a hedge out of them. Okay, here they are with the fruit. There's 3 or 4 different kinds. They all do like to go sideways, so keeping them in a hedge could be a challenge. Could be a real challenge. Okay, same thing could be said for dogwood. It doesn't go sideways as readily as a rose will. And if you work it pretty hard, you can get a pretty good shrub hedge there. I think that's a pretty amazing row of dogwood, if you ask me. They do have interesting flowers. You generally miss those, but the berries go quickly too. The varied thrush and the cedar waxwing are working a non-native plant. Does anybody know what that non-native plant might be? It's a really common plant here, and it's related to apples. It's a European mountain ash. And the reason I included that here is because there is a bushy mountain ash that does grow here, but it grows up in the mountains. And so that habitat variance might make it a little bit harder to grow at this elevation. And you want to be sure to differentiate between that. I can say, oh yeah, I want to go get a mountain ash, but the nursery will give you the tree and the birds will spread the berries. Okay, you don't want that. Because, look at all the holly that you've got growing in the forest here. It's because of the birds eating the berries. Okay, on the top right, the red elderberry. Below it is the blue elderberry, and it does grow here. We're thinking about maybe doing some research about what the original peoples used to cultivate here on Anderson Island. It would be kind of interesting to tell, because there's a clear abundance of evergreen huckleberries and salal, and this was an island that was not inhabited by any one tribe. They just all visited. And collectively, they probably worked together to work the land, to work the berry patches, to work the culturally modified cedar trees, to burn the areas where they keep the camas growing. Okay? So there's some interesting history there, and a lot of these berries would have been very attractive to them. Okay, how about these fruiting shrubs? These are all current plants. You've got the red flowering currant over here with the hummer working it. This is a different type of currant, Ribes bracteosum, which is known as a swamp or a stink currant, because it does have a kind of a fragrance, I guess. The thimbleberry in the top middle with those rose-like flowers and big maple-like leaves. I have a big patch of those because they show up and they're about waist high, and it's just one stem. But that one stem has a lot of big maple-like leaves on it and produces a lot of felty raspberries on it. There's a golden currant that would also grow. Carol, this would be a good one, I think, for you on one of your hills. Okay, let's take a look at some evergreen types of things. I've seen a lot of this low-growing Oregon grape, okay? And that's why it's called Oregon grape. It's because of the grapes. Have you ever smelled these flowers in the spring? They smell like roses. Okay, there's 3 different kinds of Oregon grape that grow here. The tall one is in the middle here. That's taller than I am, and it can get up to 12 feet tall, so it really lives up to that name. And then the low one, and it has this really stiff, this whole thing is a leaf from here to here, whereas over here it's just one of those pieces that's a leaf. And here's one that stays this low. It's the repens. So getting to know the plant by botanical name gets important, because if you want a really specific plant, you've got to know the botanical name. Okay? Here's how this low repens can fill in a big area. A big area, you know, as big as a car. One plant. Okay? How about the kinnikinnick on the right side? That will also cover a big flat area, and you don't need to water it. You don't need to water any of these. Any of them. I love it. Okay? And there's one fairly new type of Oregon grape. It's not from Oregon. It's coming from Asia, and it stands about this tall, and it's blooming right now. It was blooming before we had that really, really deep chill, and it is still blooming. It's amazing. And the hummingbirds are loving it. I don't know the botanical on it, I'm afraid. Let's keep going, because there's still more. How about some other shrubs? Anybody know this bush here? Ocean spray. Okay? It starts out with these really incredibly cool sprays of white flowers that fade out, and those turn brown over time. But the bush tits, the chickadees, all the little birds that fly around in passels together, they love this. This is the meal on wheels every day. They come through my garden twice by the clock. How about this is the mock orange here, and the fragrance is really strong at a time of year when there's not much else blooming. So that's a good plant. It does like wet feet, so that's a consideration. You also have here on the island a lot of this creeping blackberry. That's a native, and I otherwise call it the devil's shoelace because it does trip you pretty good. No fun. Okay, in the middle is a type of California, it's not the California wax myrtle, it is a myrtle type of plant though, and it has these interesting seeds that form on the stem. That might be a little hard to see there. This one was growing in the Skagit Valley in a swamp. So if you need a plant that tolerates a lot of wet, Carol, that's you. That would be one of the things you might want to look at. It grows in full sun. It's a nice plant. We have snowberries over there on the right, on top, and yes, you can shape it into a little bit of a hedge, a low hedge. Okay? Lower right is the 9-bark. That's a plant that might be about as tall as up to the roof here over my head. Great fall color, beautiful, and it lives up to its name with the splitting bark 9 times, 9 lives. And then it gets these buttons of flowers on them that come out in June, pretty late, and then those fade pink and then to brown, and again, kind of like the ocean spray, The birds love all the bugs that are nestled in between the flowers. And those flowers hang on all winter long. So it gives you some variety. It's kind of interesting to look at different times of the year. So for me, as a landscape designer, I tend to look for things that give me interest at all times of the year, not just in spring or summer, but in winter and fall, all year round. How about some ferns? Okay, the maidenhair fern. This is the native one. There's another one that is pretty cool and kind of like it, but that has the black stem in it, but it is not a native. The standard and toughest plant in the world, sword fern, that's this tall, okay? Up in the tree, the maple tree here, or down in the ground over there, is the licorice root fern, okay? Below it, deer fern. This one has two different kinds of fronds. It has a frond that comes up and sporulates, and then it withers. It looks kind of not so hot, but it has a very leathery leaf, and it likes to grow in the shade. A little bit higher elevation. Up top right is the lady fern, and then you have a little bit of a wood fern. Low, tiny, diminutive plant. And there's actually a larger version of that, the spiny wood fern. Okay, looking at the ground layer. Who are we going to find here? Thrushes, wrens, song sparrows, things like that. Let's take a look at some of the other things that might be here. Okay, I wanted to give you, I've got books galore. Can you imagine if I went through all of those plants that are in these books? You'd be here for a week. I don't want to do that to you. It's kind of a long time already. And, just for doing plants that like wetlands, there's still a big book. So, or plants that bees like. There's a lot to know. And so I can't expect everybody to pick it up right away or to remember it after you've seen it once. It's important to be just tuned into the concept, yeah, I should do a native plant, and I might do the thing that produces the most nuts or produces the opportunity for bugs to live there. That hasn't been cultivated to not need any help, okay? Here's some plants that work on the ground plane. Got onions here, nodding onions. They live up to their name. How about camas bulbs? I think we have camas prairies out here. Here's that devil's shoelace again. How about some strawberries? Three different flavors actually. Okay, the Virginia creeper. This will fill in an area, but not like the beach strawberry. And then the other one that clusters and moves around. These are really sweet and tasty, but you have to know where to look. The Armeria, the sea thrift, is a fun plant because it has this popsicle pink flowers on it. And on the top right is a type of pussy toes. Bottom right, anybody know what that is? Wild ginger, yeah. It doesn't have the root that you could cook with, but it sure will grow if it's got its feet in something yummy, and it will cover a lot of territory. So it's a great ground cover that will keep the weeds down. Okay, how about some of the birds that are working these areas? These are plants that are pretty close to the ground. I had a cat that pulled a hummingbird right out of the air as she was sitting there watching it. I was like, oh boy, I got to bring that one in. Okay, didn't let her out again after that. It changed my mind. How about flickers on your lawn, if you have a lawn? They like to forage around for the grubs. And the grubs are there because our lawns get compacted from all the rain. And it's a meal you're providing by having your lawn in that shape for the flickers. But they would rather have some other things that are in the trees. How about the birds that are coming down to eat other birds? That's a cooper, I believe, in my own yard, and picking up off of my poor little towhees or my juncos. It was kind of hard to watch. But it was kind of cool to see it. That sprinkler fixture is about this tall. So it was right there, right out my window, and oh yeah, I like your birds. Okay, and some sparrows and a little Pacific wren. What kind of a sparrow is that up on the top right? Say? Sooty fox. Yes, sooty fox. Good. You all know your birds out here. It's pretty cool. All right, so what we haven't talked about so far are wetlands. And you do have your share of them out here. I'm considering not only what grows in the wetland, whether it's a marsh area or a pond area like you have over in the right, but what might be flying around above it or nesting in the reeds of it, or maybe hunting. Who knows? Those are my dad's decoys, I think. That Pacific wren or flycatcher over there loves the willows. Or is that, it's a willow flycatcher, I'm sorry. And then some of the other things that you might even grow. This is the tuber that the wapato tubers that the Native Americans would eat. Okay, how about other opportunities? How many of you might have a snag in your yard that you could do this with? Okay, you don't have to actively create a snag, but this is how you do it, if you really want to. This guy is about to chop down a tree that could be a snag, that would be a valuable source of bugs for birds. But you know, how often do we want to? Oh, I don't know. I want to see a tree, not something dead. Okay, owls and woodpeckers and all kinds of birds need snags in which to build their nests. This is a really big deal, because if we're concerned about bird populations that are kind of doing this, we need to start looking at all the different habitats and needs that the birds have. Not just food, but things like snags. Okay, how about your lawn? If you're going to keep a bit of lawn, why not look at how you could do it differently? You could have nothing but something other but lawn here. These are steppable plants, woolly thyme or veronica. This is eco lawn that they've always been selling. Or you could just mow part of the lawn and leave the rest. I like that idea a lot. All right, so part of where I go when my designer brain turns on is I try to develop different places for you to play in. Not just you, but for, say, the birds, or your pet, or your kids. What kind of needs do each of those interests have? Do they want to be able to see the waterfront like you do, Carol? Okay, or do you want some seclusion over there? You can create that with just knowing which plants provide you with different types of enclosure or low boundaries. All right, so part of the design process gets caught up in this creation of different spaces and how you define an edge from the planting area. How do you define the walking zone? It could be your lawn. You keep the part of the lawn that you want to walk on. And it's really easier to maintain that way. Okay? Now I'm going to throw this one at you. And again, I don't want you to feel like you have to mesmerize this. But this is here to show you how involved the landscape installation process can be. I thought I had the design thing first, but here we are. Well, the installation process is okay, because you've got to decide who's going to do the work. Are you going to design it yourself, or are you going to let somebody else do that? I'll do it. Even before you get the design done, you want to get the weeds taken care of. I was just looking at a place over here in the forest, and they have weeds going already. They haven't even been there a year, and they've got the bed straw coming up. So we're gonna try and get ahead of that before they start planting other things. Because if they don't, it's always gonna tackle them. Okay. Part of that weed management is how you prepare your soil, and then you have this one after the other: trees first, shrubs. But there's always maintenance. That's an obligatory thing. If you're gonna have a landscape, not an apartment, you're going to be taking care of your landscape, either mowing your lawn or doing something with the garden itself. Okay? Somebody's going to do it. The Native Americans always actually heavily managed their landscapes. Here's the design process that I'm looking at when I go to a site. I try and get a map of where your things are, what you want to do, how much space you need. And all of these things always come back to the maintenance. How much time or money or effort do you want to expend on your maintenance? That maintenance is always the really kind of the bottom line. You know, can you do it? Because a lot of people get all excited about the landscape and go, yeah, I want to do this, I want to do this. And they forget that, yeah, if I do this all at once, especially if they tear out the entire lawn, they're really going to create a kind of a maintenance nightmare at first. And so when I say, if you're going to tear out the lawn and start over again, think about it. You know, you might do it piecemeal instead of all at once. And it'll be cheaper that way in the long run. Okay? What other things do you need to do for your site? Do you need to regrade it? Do you need to build other structures? Do you need to accommodate for where a structure will be built maybe 5 or 10 years down the road? Having a plan in mind that accommodates those changes over time allows you to build it at your leisure. If you have all of it kind of worked out, and it doesn't have to be designed to the last detail, but it helps you to have a picture in mind. I'm going to give you one more big chart here, again, not to test you, but I want to differentiate between the sustainable landscape and the more traditional, okay? And a lot of them relate to the planning process that I just talked about. We tend to look at the standard landscape as a just a palette. You know, let's put in a lawn and a couple of trees and sell it. Or you know, it's harder to be more creative with your traditional landscape. It's kind of inviting to be creative when you do the sustainable landscape, because it really does engage your brain on how am I going to do this so that it flows in terms of time and how plants change. Because plants are anything but static. They definitely change over time. I've gone to a landscape where somebody put in shade-loving plants, but there was no shade yet. Because the trees were going to eventually get big, but the shade plants didn't need to be there quite yet. So that's kind of the idea that we want to keep in mind. What other materials might you already have on site? Okay, all of these things happen under the planning of your landscape site. Do you have any long-term needs that you want to deal with? Rather than designing it as you go, can you accommodate all of the different things? Okay. I discourage people to display their stuff, especially big plants or palm trees, things. I have a thing. I hope you don't have any palm trees. Anyway, you can see I have a thing about palm trees. Well, you know, we're in Washington. Why are we planting a palm tree up here? I suppose. Anyway, really in the long run, I want to make your landscape really useful to you. It should add value to your house. It can add like up to 15% of the value of your structure to the exterior if you do it right. If you make it low maintenance, if you make it look pretty, and you know, not too demanding. Okay? How about that lawn area? That lawn area might be part of that. A lot of people want a lawn because they have kids or pets. And what about the plant materials that you might be putting in there? A lot of people go and do the shop. Oh, I like that. I gotta have one of those. Do you have that problem? Little impulse purchasing. This happens to me all the time, and then I bring it home, and it's like, where am I gonna put this? I don't have any sun because of all those big trees that I have. And so, like, you know, the nursery industry is really good at selling plants. And so we've got to be really careful to say, you know, I really like that, but I don't have any place for it. Or it's going to get much bigger than any place that I happen to have available for it. Okay? And there is the benefit of the plan, because the plan should accommodate how big those trees are going to be and how far their branches lean over your house, or kind of look at your house as maybe a meal. Okay? How about soil preparation? Anybody have dirt that they like or soil that they love? Dirt is kind of like, hey, I don't like dirt. Soil, if it smells good, not rank, it's probably going to grow something beneficial for you. And usually, if you're using organic matter that is already on your site, whether it's wood chips, even lawn clippings, sometimes if you do that right, don't let that rot, that can help you build some fantastic soil. And your non-native plants need it more than the natives do. The native plants actually tolerate a lot of no maintenance, no fertility, lots of water in the winter, and lots of dry in the summer. But maybe not as much dry as we're getting now. Okay, so that's why I get into the mulches, and I ask the question of whether or not you want to irritate your landscape. Did I say irritate? I'm sorry. All right, I used to be the water conservation specialist for the city of Tacoma. And so I got your attention maybe because those irrigation systems are not cheap. It's either a pipe that you put in the ground, or you have a lot of little pipes wandering around like spaghetti, and sometimes they don't stay under the mulch, so you get to look at them. And sometimes those little spaghetti pipes, they come unplugged, so you don't realize that, oh, that's not working anymore, is it? Because the plant is kind of looking a little wilty. Okay? Whereas the big spray irrigation system, it's going to water. Clearly, the lawn is the better place for that, for the big spray head irrigation systems. Okay? And all of these really do land at maintenance. There isn't such a thing as a no-maintenance landscape. So the big difference here, though, with the sustainable landscape is that you get to eventually do less and get more out of it for your health as well as for the health of nature. Okay? So I'm going to come back to the birds and why we're doing this. Okay? We're here for the birds, and I want to give you these other tools that help you create birds, but it brings me back to this image. Can you create safe corridors or safe nesting and resting places for them, whether it's in the evergreens or in the deciduous trees that they like some of, or even in these really tight little plantings of shrubs? Some of them, the towhees and the juncos, they like to nest down in this kind of habitat down here. What do your birds want? Okay, can the cats get in there? I don't know. My cats can't. I don't have cats anymore, but my neighbors do. And I've got my area thickly enough planted that they cannot get into this zone. And I love it because it's like, too bad. But sometimes I see them coming through because lately has anybody had rabbits starting to populate here? Oh my goodness. I've seen the population trend starting to really happen. And I think it's because we manage our coyotes too tightly. Okay, we need to I heard a whole bunch of them earlier tonight. That was kind of cool. But the rabbits planted a bunch of little kits, little baby rabbits, in my garden in a little spot like right there, right next to the driveway. And I was like, oh my goodness, there's 5 of them in there. And wouldn't you know, every day, same time in the morning, the cat from across the street came over and just kind of looked at him, and next thing I knew, she was carting off one of them. And you could hear the poor little one. Oh, God, drove me crazy. I chased it one time, and I almost got it. All right, so the idea, though, how can we support nature? How can we emulate it to help it do its thing? I mean, it's trying to do us a favor by keeping us shaded or temperately cool. You know, have you noticed how hot your garden can be without a tree shading your house? How much does that affect your utility bill when you don't have that shade? Or when you do get the end of the day hot sun and you wish you had that shade? All right? Or in the winter, if you do still have the evergreen because you live in the forest, okay? There's ways to build it so that you can have a little bit of both. These are some of the resources that you can call upon for getting more. This book is no longer in print, but I do believe you can get it online. And Washington State University, Washington Native Plant Society has excellent plant lists for all different types of habitats, which is what that book did originally. They looked at dry areas in the wet shade. They looked at the sunny. These are the different habitat combinations that you'll probably have at home that you want to. Now there's a way to, that's a list that works. It's not just, oh, well, here's a list of plants that are all native. You want to match the habitat or the soil or what's the elevation or how wet is your soil? Again, is it disturbed? That might influence what grows there for you. How much sun do you have? Are you close to the salty water? Have you noticed that there's a particular yellow blooming flower on the shoreline over here? That's called gumweed. The Native Americans would actually chew it because it's gummy. But it's a very sticky yellow flower. It likes that salt water, so why not work with plants that do it? Okay? More resources. These are, again, it's a little bit of a repeat. The Native Plant Society, there's their website. Xerces. I have one of their books up here for pollinators. And the conservation districts, wherever you happen to be, Thurston, King, Pierce County, throughout the state, throughout the country, conservation districts are pretty together. And they have plant sales periodically. The Nature Center over at Tacoma, Go Natives, that's where Don Norman, the guy doing all that research that we looked at, he runs that. Woodbrook is over in Giggle Harbor. And then Calendula is a new nursery in Tacoma. They sell both native and non-native, and that guy really knows his stuff. He brings in a lot of cool things from California too. So if you really want to kind of stretch your boundaries, I'm not a purist. I don't think it's possible to be a purist anymore, really. There's some interesting plants coming up from the south that are worth trying. Okay? And last but not least, I think other resources. These are books that you could either find at the library or download altogether about lawn care, about sustainability, design concepts, and about bugs. Don't be bugged by bugs. That's my story. I'm going to stick to it. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate your help. There we go. Yes?
What kind of habitat does Wapato like? Is there any stands about?
Habitat that Wapato likes. Wet. Really wet. And you have it actually out there. But be forewarned that whoever's been visiting your place, whether it's otters, beavers, or raccoons, or muskrats, they all really like Wapato. And so you're going to have to farm it or put it in cages or do something to keep them from, walking away with it on day one. Sometimes the birds will do that too.
So would it grow where skunk cabbage grows?
Yes, it would grow, and it needs a little bit more water than that. A little bit more. Maybe, like 3 inches of water would probably be good. But, you've got a variable table over there too. So, it's worth a little bit more research. I haven't done it personally. I've grown it in bowls. Most of it I've seen has been in pots on somebody's deck where the raccoons still get to. Those stinkers. Okay, other questions? Yes.
Do you know why our native hazelnut hazelnuts are sometimes empty of seed.
Nuts? Oh, why the native hazelnuts are sometimes empty. That could be a pollinator problem. Okay? And it could, so the pollinator problem is two-tiered. The hazelnut, to my knowledge, does not need a male-female. They're both on the same branch. You saw the flowers on that one stem that I had in my hand. And so the pollen could get from the other. The timing of that pollen is probably in the next week, when those catkins, the long ones, are hanging down and releasing their pollen. If your female flowers got frozen in the 20-degree or 16-degree or whatever, how cold did it get out here? Maybe not too bad. That if they were blooming at all during that time, those little tiny red things, that might take them out for that year. Okay, it's kind of like a fruit tree. Same thing. If the female flower goes, sorry, you're out of luck this year. There could be other reasons, and it's worth maybe doing a little bit more research than that. I'm going off the, I would be asking WSU Extension. They're a good resource for that. There are a slew of bugs, for example, that are taking out the evergreen trees this year. And so I visited one tree that just turned in a day or two red, brown, gone. And every time I went by it, I found a new big beetle, or a wasp that was ovipositing to plant other bugs in the worms that might still be in the tree. So it was like, oh wow, this poor tree is covered with beetles. It was a meal. And we wouldn't have seen it anyway because all of it was happening on the inside of the tree. It took me several days, it took me a week to figure out what kind of bugs each one of these beetles or wasps were, because there were so many of them. And part of it, we have a lot of stress during the summer with the extended dry season. So be thinking about, all right, that's where that question of whether or not the irrigation system is going to be helpful. Are you on vacation when you want to have something to water in your garden? If you are, then having some kind of a system or somebody who will come over and stand there for a while and give your garden some water is a good idea. If you don't have that, you might lose what you just planted, especially if you planted something past maybe the middle of February. Okay? You can plant stuff until about the middle of February, but then it's going to need to get really ready for the next season of heat between February and when it really turns on. And so I say, if you can plant way before February, even starting back in October, you score. You make points. Because then your plants have opportunity to connect with all of the mycorrhizal fungi that are in the soil that do a lot of the work and go out there and collect the water, and they break down the nutrients and bring it right to the plant and put it in the root of the tree or the shrub or whatever it is. Plants are pretty exclusively dependent upon mycorrhizal fungi to do that work for them. Because otherwise, you need to be feeding them something like Miracle-Gro that comes down through the soil and comes into contact with the roots. Believe it or not. And where does it go after that? Out to the Puget Sound. Okay? If we're thinking about why we have algal blooms out there, that's part of the problem. It's one piece of the problem, but it is part of the problem. Anytime we're using really fast-release fertilizers, it comes in contact with the roots that are only in the top 10, 12, 18 inches at the most, because that's where the air is. Got to be able to breathe, don't you? Okay, roots need to be able to breathe too, and so do the fungi. And so if that fertilizer drifts past the root zone, it's free game for Puget Sound. Okay? We don't want that. Yes?
We've got some of those Gary oaks.
Yes, Gary oaks.
At our place. And
In pots, did you say?
no, just
Oh, you have a lot. Oh, well,
like
cool.
during the summer and fall, we've noticed that they'll be swarming with those
Yeah. Oh, and you know,
Yellow jackets, but
right.
they're bald-faced ones.
And they aren't going to bother you unless you get in there and start to bat at them.
They don't like get upset, but I was just wondering why. We don't see like a nest up there or anything.
Okay. Well, wasps actually nest in a lot of different things. Sometimes they'll nest. Do you have the little galls? They're probably coming out of the galls. That's a gall wasp potentially, and they're hatching. Because, all right, so in the spring, a wasp will lay an egg at the root of the bud, and the critter will get in there and start exuding something that looks a lot like an herbicide and makes the gall get big. It's a tumor, basically, but that's where it hatches inside, and it's totally protected. And it's got a nice little nest, and some other critter might come and lay an egg on it or do something like that, but everybody's working on everybody else. It's fascinating. And I didn't bring the one book, but it's called The Hidden Company That Trees Keep. If you want to get into that, it's like reading an encyclopedia, and it's fascinating. And it's not just me. I am a geek, but that's really good reading because it comes with extraordinary illustrations of each bug like that. This is where I learned this. and who else they're eating. So it takes me back to how many little things the chickadee needs to feed its passel of chicks, 600 bugs for one passel of chickadees.
Those pieces of bark we saw today.
Okay, there are 3 pieces of bark that we picked up as we were walking around at Idealsh today, and you can see that there are a whole bunch of really cool channels in them that the boring beetles have made. And some of them are radial, and some of them are crisscross like this, and then there's one channel with a hole every inch, which I thought was kind of cool. I was like, that's 3 different boring beetles. I couldn't begin to tell you which ones they were, but it was just fascinating to see, and all of it was behind the bark. You wouldn't have been able to see it until the bark fell off. So it was kind of interesting, and some of those bugs may be predating on other bugs that are already in there. The wasps are doing the same thing. They'll lay their eggs in the larvae that are in there. It's kind of gross, really, but it's very interesting too. Yeah, it's very interesting. Those pieces that we mentioned are by the table to the left of the doorway if you want to look at them.
They really look decorative too.
They're very creative. They're awesome. Other good questions? Okay, I appreciate your time. Thank you for coming.